Welcome to the final event in our Countdown to COP26 series on reflection and action in our churches and local communities. My name is James Buchanan, and I welcome you on behalf of the Focolare Integral Ecology Group here in Great Britain. As a group, we met a few times earlier on in the year, but we really saw that there was an opportunity to learn and share together, and so that was the reason for organising this series, obviously with the crucial UN climate talks coming to the UK, to Glasgow later this year. So we're very pleased to welcome three speakers tonight. Maria-Elena Arana from CAFOD, JP Decay, John Paul Decay from Ecological Conversion Group, and Eileen McQuaid, who's a Focolare volunteer. Most people will be familiar with Zoom after living life in lockdown for a while, but I should go through a few practical things before introducing our speakers. So firstly, please do mute your microphones unless you're speaking. All except the speakers should be muted when joining, but you will be able to chat when we go into breakout rooms. You can post questions and comments in the chat, and the chat button is at the bottom of your screen. The chat will not be open when our speakers are speaking, but it will be open at other times. Please, could you send any questions? This may contradict what I just said, actually, but anyway. Please, could you send any questions to to Dave Williams. Please, could you send any questions to Dave Williams, who's waving now, you might see him, via the chat box. But don't worry, we'll be keeping an eye open for any comments and questions in the chat box as the meeting host. So if you can, please send a direct message to Dave Williams, but otherwise we will be looking out just in case it goes into the main chat box. Secondly, as you'll probably already have noticed, we are recording the session, and the screen settings are set so that the speakers are spotlighted. If you would prefer not to appear on camera, then please do feel free to turn off your video. So the format for this evening is to have an initial reflection of around 10 minutes from Eileen McQuaid. And then we'll hear from Maria-Elena Arana, campaign coordinator at CAFOD, about CAFOD's climate campaigns and various ways in which you can take action in your parish leading up to COP26, including Climate Sunday. And after that, we'll have JP Decay, who'll be speaking about the work of Ecological Conversion Group and a Journey to 2030 campaign. At around 8:15, we'll then have around 15 minutes for questions and answers with Maria-Elena and JP. So do please put your questions in the chat, and the meeting host will draw attention to the questions that are raised. But please be patient with us. There's obviously quite a number of us on the call this evening, so we'll do our best to get through as many of the questions as we can, but there's a chance obviously that we may not get through all of them. So apologies in advance if we don't get through all the questions, but the earlier you send your questions in, I think in our experience, the greater the likelihood. So please do get your questions in today early. At 8:30, we'll then have breakout rooms so that smaller groups can discuss anything that's come up so far, and we can take the opportunity obviously all to speak as well as listen. We've gently prepared a few people to help facilitate groups, but there will no doubt be no shortage of things for us all to share. Then at 8:50, we'll come back together for a roundup and some ideas on what we can do next, and we plan to finish by 9 o'clock. So hope this will be an interesting and informative evening together. So now I'd like to welcome our first speaker, Eileen McQuaid, who's a member of Focolare based in Scotland. Eileen has done a Laudate Si animators course with the Global Catholic Climate Movement and also started a Laudate Si book club. So Eileen, we're delighted to have you with us. It's over to you. You're muted, Eileen, sorry.
Sorry, I think I would just like to say at the beginning not to be discouraged by how little or insignificant you might feel in going ahead and taking any action, because the experience of our book club has been to kind of expose that as a bit of a lie. So we started the first book club with 5 people in it and went on to a second one where the numbers had tripled. And from the second one, 5 people signed up to become animators. We made 3 submissions to the Scottish Government about climate change. We started networking with other groups, and our latest book club had over 30 people that signed up for it. So it makes a difference. And I'm always encouraged that Pope Francis said, you know, that we're snowflakes, but when we come together, we can form an avalanche. So I'm quite happy to be a snowflake so long as I stick together with others through this. So I'm going to share my screen. And in Laudato Si, Pope Francis offers a response to the most challenging sign of the times, the ecological crisis. He cites and accepts the scientific consensus that a crisis has been caused by human activity. As this is a symptom of a deeper spiritual crisis, he synthesizes the scientific and Christian perspectives to offer us a comprehensive explanation of what has gone wrong in our world and how we should respond. Laudato Si is at pains to tell us that everything is connected. Okay, that everything is connected. Those 3 words indicate that the document encompasses more than its title, care for our common home. More than it may suggest. It urges us to seek comprehensive solutions that are attentive to the interactions between natural and social systems. The perspective of the poor is integral to Laudato Si. The environment will not be protected if we neglect the needs of the world's most vulnerable people. We are not faced with 2 separate crises, one environmental and one social. But we are faced with one complex crisis, which is both environmental and social. Strategies for a solution demand an integrated approach to combating poverty, restoring dignity to the excluded, and at the same time protecting nature. The environmental crisis, therefore, is an issue of social justice, just as those who have done the least to cause it are suffering the most severe circumstances. In the spirit, sorry, I don't know what's going wrong here. Can you just give me a second? Okay. In the spirit of St. Francis of Assisi, who was in communion with all of creation, Francis refers to our planet as a sister who cries out to us. He urges us to hear both the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. Oops, sorry. I honestly don't know what's happening to this. Let's see. Okay, right, okay. The poor are the people most closely connected with the earth and share in its pain. When global warming causes hurricanes to devastate communities, it's the poor who cry out because their homes have been destroyed. When our precious ecosystems suffer because of coral bleaching, their cries are echoed by the fishing communities who have lost their means of subsistence. When the recent extreme heat waves hit California, it was the homeless who could get no relief from the unrelenting heat and cried out as they died in the streets. The poor cry out as the earth cries out, and yet the poor have done little to cause the devastation our planet is suffering from. The environmental crisis can be seen as being rooted in 3 human characteristics. I'm sorry, I'm pressing the right button here and I don't know why. It's taken me back. Do you know, will I just read it and we'll forget the slides and do that because it's just causing a problem just now.
Do you want to try one more time, Eileen? And then
Okay.
Yeah,
Right. We'll try. Right. Firstly, man has placed himself at the centre of creation and increasingly believes that through science and technology, he can find all the solutions to the world's problems. He sees himself in control and in so doing places himself where only God should be. This is arrogance. Progress in science and technology has brought many benefits, but it also presents a particular challenge for us. Its growth has not been matched with moral, ethical, or spiritual growth. This imbalance is fracturing our relationships with creation, with humanity, and with God. A technological development which does not leave in its wake a better world and a higher quality of life cannot be considered progress. Secondly, apathy has led us to stand back, waiting for someone else to take responsibility for the care of the poor and of the environment. Threats to the environment and accompanying poverty remain hidden because many professional opinion makers, communications, media, and centres of power are located in affluent urban areas and are far removed from the poor because of having little direct contact with their problems. Pope Francis is critical about those with power who are far removed from the poor, who never come into contact with them and experience their concerns. For Pope Francis, to help and love the most vulnerable means being close to them. Thirdly, extreme greed drives us to want to have more and more. The warming caused by huge consumption on the part of some rich countries has repercussions on the poorest areas of the world. Greed, furthermore, drives corporations to only think about profits and not about the people or the planet. A throwaway culture is promoted, which ultimately leads to a diminished respect for human life itself and allows such social ills as human trafficking, sexual exploitation, blood diamonds, fur trade, and slavery to flourish. We can add to this the inequitable distribution of COVID vaccines worldwide, which may yet prove to be a grave error of judgment. We can view each of these characteristics as a lack of love that ultimately alienates us from God, from each other, and from nature. Winning the fight against the crisis requires us to embrace love to the measure Jesus commanded. Love one another as I have loved you. In turning to the Christian tradition, Pope Francis reminds us that Christ is the destiny of all creation. Christ is the perfect model of man. Christ calls us to be merciful and loving, especially to the most vulnerable among us. Christ calls us to ongoing conversion of our personal lifestyles and social systems. Repairing the damage we've done to the planet begins with an individual ecological conversion. Sorry, I just lost my place. That brings meaning to caring for each other and for creation. A spiritual transformation is needed. Pope Francis calls on us to live simpler lives, being mindful of others and the planet. If we didn't just hear the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor, but actually listen to those voices, we would hear the voice of God directing us. How would we respond? Would we take personal action to reduce our impact on God's creation? Would we divest from fossil fuels? Would we choose renewable fuels as a source of energy? Would we advocate for political action on behalf of the poor and marginalised who have no voice? Would we speak out for the environmentalists who are murdered each year? Would we advocate for our communities to transition to a just economy that would combat poverty, restore dignity to the excluded, and at the same time protect nature? Would we see that every purchase we make has a moral responsibility? Education is a key factor in achieving a global ecological conversion. Education about ecology and the human place in creation must be prioritised. Within our faith communities, small group gatherings could take up this dialogue to determine how to go ahead. While ecological conversion starts with the individual, the conversion of our national and international cultures is required to bring about a global transformation. The climate crisis is not in the future, it is here. It's already affecting millions of people's lives and livelihoods. The war against it won't be won or lost in chambers of commerce, or in plenary halls of the UN, or in parliaments around the world. This is a war that will be won at grassroots. Father Jostrom Kurithodam from the Vatican Dicastery for the Promotion of Integral Human Development said that it only takes 3% of the population of a country to affect change. This was the statistic that brought down the Berlin Wall. But 21% of the population can bring about a systemic change in the governance of a country. Pope Francis is aware of this and urges individuals to take action and make a difference. We need to be confident that our voice counts. We need to double our efforts, not only working together, but standing together as one family to confront this crisis. But in that, there is hope. This could be the uniting factor for humanity and an opportunity not to be missed.
Thanks very much, Eileen. Are you able to stop sharing your screen?
I am trying to do it. I did stop it, but I don't know what's happening with my computer. I'm so sorry.
Not at all. Thanks so much, Eileen. Thanks for your beautiful and inspiring reflection. I think that started off this evening really, really well, and it's given a lot of set the frame really perfectly for some of the discussions that we're going to be having this evening. So thanks so much, Eileen. And yeah, I'm sure a lot of the things that you've been sharing during your talk will come up again during the group discussion later on as well. So thank you. Thanks so much, Eileen. So our next speaker is Maria Elena Arana, who's the campaign coordinator at CAFOD. Maria Elena was born in Mexico and grew up in New York. She spent the last 30 years working in CAFOD's campaigns team on issues including refugees, landmines, debt cancellation, workers' rights, and has been campaigning on the climate crisis with CAFOD since 2007. She's on the steering group for Climate Sunday, which is a project of the Environmental Issues Network of Churches Together in Britain and Ireland. So, Maria Elena, we're delighted to have you here. Thanks for joining us, and it's over to you.
Thanks very much. It's wonderful to be here. I always remember going to the Focolare Centre outside of Florence for a long weekend and remember that very fondly. So it's great to be here with you virtually from all of you across the country. And James is going to do the slides, so I don't have to worry about technology. And that also makes me quite happy.
Okay. Can you see this okay?
Perfect. Oh, you might need to enable content. Possibly, but yeah, great. So I thought I would start with Climate Sunday. As James mentioned, it is the an ecumenical project of the Churches Together in Britain and Ireland, and I sit on their Environmental Issues Network group, and it kind of came up as an idea kind of back in October 2019. We decided to go for it and to kind of fundraise for it and to kind of organize a part-time organizer and set up the website. And the whole idea of Climate Sunday started with the idea of churches across the UK having a service about climate justice in advance of COP26 in Glasgow. And when we started, we thought that was going to be in November 2020. Next slide. Could we have the, yep. So as I said, it's an ecumenical project. All the denominations were asked to do kind of templates. So we've done one, a number of the other churches have done one. The Church of England has one, so that there's a kind of something that you can use and adapt in order to hold that service. Next slide. So the idea was to not just focus on only the service, but to, as well as holding a service, and we are now then having a kind of 4 nations, bringing all of that kind of prayer and support for climate justice and kind of wanting to stand out and really speak to the UK government to kind of be a leader. We also said that it would be a sign of commitment if whatever church would choose a kind of greening award scheme. So for many that could be Eco Church, for Catholic parishes as well as schools in England and Wales, that's the Live Simply Award. In Scotland, it's Eco Congregations, also Eco Congregations in Ireland. So it was kind of to point people to that sign of commitment to kind of be involved in, you know, becoming more, living more simply, looking at sustainability. I loved that Eileen mentioned the 3% from Father Josh, and kind of thinking about how we can kind of be the salt of the earth. And so I think often those award schemes, you know, you can be that yeast 11, be that salt. And also speaking up. And there's many ways that people can be campaigning locally, but there was an idea that you could sign up as a congregation on the Climate Coalition's The Time Is Now declaration. Individually, they've got now over 150,000 people have signed that declaration, but through the Climate Sunday website, churches can sign up as a congregation. And so I think that kind of says something a bit more. So that is the particular action that Climate Sunday kind of asks that you consider. But, you know, there's many other ways that you can be involved, either, you know, in your own local community, but also kind of in national groups or supporting other agencies, other initiatives. Next slide. So this is just a few social media tweets. So the first one is an outdoor service, Climate Sunday service that the Farm Street, the Jesuits in Farm Street did. There's one from the Diocese of Oxford, so a number of things just to kind of show the different range of Climate Sunday services and events that have taken place already, and also many more are coming. And although we've kind of highlighted the 5th of November as the kind of nation's kind of service to bring all together that commitment and that support, you know, we needed a date in the season of creation in advance of the COP, but we're not saying that all the services have to happen by then. So you could certainly organize a Climate Sunday Mass or service anytime during the season of creation or anytime in advance of the COP. But if you register it, then it can be listed. At the moment, last time I think I looked, that we had over 1,200 churches registered, which is great, but we'd obviously want many more. So if you haven't thought about it, there's still plenty of time. And we know it's a quiet, fallow time now with churches, with schools being closed and parishes not so active at the minute, but you could certainly come think about it and plan something for the autumn that could still be part of Climate Sunday. Next slide. So now I'm coming to kind of the CAFOD particular themes and actions that we would hope you might take, that there's still plenty of time to get involved with. So we started Reclaim Our Common Home kind of campaign towards the beginning of this year, particularly focusing on the fact that the UK, you know, we need the UK government to be leaders, we need our Prime Minister to be a leader. We need our Chancellor to kind of agree for the funding for the climate finance. So there are particular reasons why we need to continue to push those issues. And of course, you will be aware that we had the G7 meetings in Cornwall in June. We were not particularly pleased with the lack of action that was taken there. So there's still time to be pushing, but it's getting more and more urgent. Next slide. So we have a petition that people can do online and can promote kind of on their parish websites, on their, kind of their kind of electronic newsletters, if those are going out to people. But we also have a way of ordering for free individual action cards. So if, for example, during the season of creation, you wanted to do a kind of COVID safe signing, you could order cards so that you would have them for that period of time. The petition will be wound up kind of in early October. So we'd really, really want to encourage as many people as possible to sign on to the petition. Next slide. We have another initiative which is kind of linked to MP engagement, which we believe is hugely important action to be involved with. And you might say, oh, well, my MP is useless, he never does anything, or he won't agree to meet. But we've been really pleased at the number of MPs that have already kind of met with their constituents as parish groups, and it's going swimmingly. I think we've now had more than 70 MP meetings, the vast majority of which have happened virtually, so on Zoom or other platform, and been really, really positive. Next slide, we'll see some of the comments from some of the MPs kind of saying how much they enjoyed it and how pleased they were to hear the views about these important issues in terms of climate, but people also brought up, issues about the cuts to aid, about cancelling of debt for the poorest country and the impact of vaccine inequality. So those other issues have also been brought up, and it's really important for our MPs to recognise that that's something that people are thinking about. They would have said, if you the polls, many of them might say people generally in the country supported the cutting of aid, but yet when they could hear people in parishes saying, no, this is actually really important for us, it was an important moment for MPs to hear. Next slide. And this is just a kind of a panorama of some of the events that have happened already across the country. So some really, really excellent meetings, but if people haven't even heard about it before and you want to do it, there is still time. And September, we think, will be a really important time for MPs to be hearing from their constituents that climate justice in advance of the COP, to know that it's important for people and that their government needs to be taking better action and involved. We think another key moment will be kind of that mid-September period of time when the UN meetings are happening. So, any MP meetings that happen kind of before or around that time, it's a really important time for it to happen. So it's not too late. Next slide. Well, we've come up with an urgent action as well, which has only been going for kind of the last week or so, and it will probably kind of be wound up the end of the summer. And we know it is the summer, there's fewer people being involved, and it's only an online action, but I would really, really encourage people to take it. We've definitely noticed, and we're not the only agency that's kind of seeing our Chancellor as a real blocker to climate commitments and funding. And so if you go to cafod.org.uk/Rishi, you'll get directly to the action, and I think the link will be sent to you. It'll be put in the chat and also be emailed to you so that you could be able to take it, because it's important that, again, he gets targeted. And I'll, at the very end of my talk, mention very briefly something else that's happening if anyone happens to be in London and is free first thing tomorrow. Next slide. So all of you will be aware that the season of creation, the 1st of September to the 4th of October, but you might not have heard that there will be the Climate Coalition's Big Green Week, which is the 18th to the 26th, which also very much overlaps during those UN meetings where there could be some decisions being taken. So it's a great opportunity. Over 2,000 events are already booked. And I was very excited to hear this morning that over 35 towns and communities across the UK are having their own Big Green Week, which means that they have organized in their communities over 30 events. So that's really kind of phenomenal news. The other thing for CAFOD supporters is that we have our yearly Harvest Fast Day on the 1st of October, and that is linking very much to the climate crisis and particularly to impacts on the Amazon and kind of human rights defenders in the Amazon. So that will be a kind of a key focus for us, but we very much kind of see our climate campaigning work, and we'll be hoping that as part of that, people will also be signing our petition. And also to say that as part of Big Green, we're having an event slightly earlier in the month of September on Saturday the 11th, a half day with some wonderful international speakers and workshops. So if you're interested, do come along to that event. And also for lay third orders, religious and clergy, I don't have it on the slide, but we're also doing a kind of reflection on climate justice with Father Peter Hughes, who's a Colombian based in Peru, who's very linked into kind of the church and the work in the Amazon. And that's on Thursday, the 23rd of September in the afternoon, starting at 2 o'clock. So I'm sure we'll be able to find the link and share that with, and it will again be open to any kind of third order lay people. Next slide. So this is a kind of just a reminder to put the 11th of September in your diary so that you don't forget and are able to sign up. Next slide. We have a climate rosary. I've only just seen it yesterday, in fact, and as I mentioned at the beginning, I'll be doing a kind of a pilot at National Justice and Peace Network conference. So if you happen to be attending this weekend, first thing on Saturday morning, you could do it with me. In fact, I had to run out to buy some rosary beads, which I don't have a stock of at home, to be able to do that with people first thing on Saturday morning. But that will be downloadable from the CAFOD website from before the beginning of the season of creation. Next slide. We're coming towards the end. Just to point out that there is a kind of prayer chain action that people can sign up if they're going to be organizing any kind of prayers about climate justice between now and the COP. We jointly with Christian Aid and Tear Fund have this Pray Without Ceasing prayer chain, and so you can go onto our website or Christian Aid or Tear Fund and just sign up to say that you'll be doing it, and others internationally are also doing it. So it's just a kind of a great symbol of prayers happening across the world. Next slide. Great. And just to mention a couple of other climate things that are going to be going on that you might be interested in, but Young Christian Climate Network are organizing, they've already started walking from Cornwall to Glasgow with residencies across England. We're very excited in London. They'll be coming here quite soon in early August. Also, the XR Faith Bridge Community COP are walking from both Bristol and London up to Glasgow. And there's some international climate pilgrims, some of whom are walking 1,000 kilometers across Germany, Belgium, and then taking the ferry to the northeast to Newcastle, North Shields, another group of Swedes, another group of Norwegians, and they'll all be walking up that coastal route and on to Glasgow for the beginning of the COP. So lots of exciting climate involvement. With YCCN, because it's happening across the UK, there are opportunities to kind of get linked into that one. So I would particularly recommend it if you're anywhere near their routes, and they are winding across both England and Scotland. So that's a great opportunity for people. And lastly, if you happen to be in London, you happen to be free tomorrow. Tomorrow is 100 days until COP. And there is a big kind of climate stunt, which has only been like organized for the last less than a week. And they were, as of this morning, they were looking for 100 people to symbolize the 100 days, and they were up to 87. So if you happen to be free, you happen to be in London, email Stuart at the Climate Coalition and see if they could still use your support. So that's me. It's been wonderful to have a bit of time and happy to answer any questions of any of these things.
Thanks.
Back to you, James.
Thanks so much, Marilena. It's amazing to hear about all the various activities that are happening in the run up to the COP, both CAFOD and wider in the coalition as well.
Absolutely, and I haven't even talked about the things that we're just planning now for October. It carries on. It carries on. Yeah,
and I mean this is really, really important. I think, as Marilena has said, now is really the time in our churches to be thinking, what are we going to be doing this autumn to raise awareness of these issues among our congregations? What are we going to be doing to speak out to politicians, as she said as well, and show that people of faith across the country, we want our government to take urgent action ahead of COP26 and be a leader on the climate crisis. So thanks so much, Marilena. I say we're looking forward to hearing from you as well in the Q&A section in a few minutes. So our next speaker is John Paul Decay, who's co-founder of the Ecological Conversion Group. The Ecological Conversion Group was set up by John Paul, Edward and Ellie in 2017 in response to Pope Francis's call in Laudato Si to care for creation. Based in the Catholic Diocese of Arundel and Brighton, but working nationally, they offer teaching and resources for individuals and parishes to make positive changes to care for our common home and our global neighbours. The Journey to 2030, their current campaign project, aims to mobilise the Catholic Church in the UK to act on our ecological crisis through the provision of high-quality visual and engaging resources for parish communities. JP is also a freelance illustrator, so a man of many talents. So JP, welcome, and thanks again for joining us. Looking forward to hearing from you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. You said Journey to 2030 is our current campaign. It will be our only campaign until the year 2030. So it's a long one. But yeah, thank you everybody for inviting me to speak. And thank you again to Eileen, who has really set the bar and set the scene very beautifully and thoroughly. So I'm going to actually pinch one of the lines from her PowerPoint as my new title for what I'm going to talk about, and it'll be now called Education About Ecology and Our Human Place in Creation, which I thought was a good way of putting it. But really, I'm going to be explaining more in depth about the idea of integral ecology and ecological conversion, which are really key concepts in Laudato Si and Fratelli Tutti. And again, looking at them, also looking at in terms of communities. And I want to start by reading a storybook. If I can share my screen. So can you all see that? Yeah. So I want to sort of start by looking at communities from a biology level, from a very basic biology level. So it's called Understanding Ecology, a storybook. So the word ecology is made of two parts. Eco comes from the ancient Greek word oikos, which means house, home, or simply environment. Logi is from logos, which means to study. Ecology is therefore the study of homes, or in other words, the study of environments. In science, it is the name given to the study of nature as interconnecting systems. So let us begin with the example of an individual pondweed. So this pondweed is at home in its pond. It's alone. It is using energy from the sun to grow by trapping carbon in its body. It is confined to its home as it needs the pond to live. So here are many pondweeds of the same species confined to sharing the same house. So this is what is known as a population. The pond is home to many other populations of other species of living things. This is known as a community. These communities are highly complex webs of interactions and food chains. The energy stored in the pondweeds and other plants is transferred up the food chains as things get eaten. But other creatures visit and interact with the pond community, joining it in a wider community that reaches far beyond the pond. Like the pondweed, each species will have its own home range. limited in their travels by different environmental factors. And it's important to note at this point that humans are part of ecology. Although they don't like to believe it, they too are constrained by food availability, physical barriers, and a suitable climate. So some species are restricted to certain areas by a lack of food or water. Some are constrained by physical barriers, such as oceans or mountains. Others are constrained by temperature. Some are constrained by a combination of these barriers. Now, communities of living things also interact with their non-living environment. Their interactions, such as eating, excreting, creating shade, capturing sunlight, breathing, little by little changes the environment around them. This interaction of living and non-living things is what we call ecosystems. Now, healthy ecosystems provide all the things we need to live, such as, at this point, anybody can unmute themselves and shout something that they think that ecosystems provide for us. Oh, silence. Oh, well, we'll go for a list.
Oxygen.
Oxygen, yes.
Food.
Food, yes, food. Good, good. So some examples. Excellent. So, yeah, so ecosystems provide, they sustain our mind and our heart. So the environment has religious and spiritual significance. It's, a gift from God. The beauty of nature makes us happy, but it also sustains the planet through photosynthesis, soil formation. It sustains the body through food, fresh water, medicine, and healthy ecosystems maintain the planet's balance. Air quality, disease and pest regulation. All these amazing things that we take for granted. So everything around the globe makes one giant interconnected network, making our planet one giant interconnected ecosystem. As living beings, we are connected through this ecology. Our lives are bound to the lives of others through nature. Pope Francis reflects this science accurately in referring to the planet as our common home. So therefore, care for nature is inseparable from care for nature, which is simply beautiful. And this is reflected in the title of Laudato Si, which St. Francis's Canticle of the Son of the Creatures, I can't remember which, but it says, "Praise be to you, my Lord, through our sister Mother Earth who sustains and governs us." And this is the correct way to be looking at the gift of all of creation. Now, the story changes a bit here because we introduce technology, as Eileen has already talked about. So this part is called Ecology, Part 2, Ecology and Globalization. So if we superimpose globalization on top of ecology, these distinct and isolated ecosystems are suddenly connected physically through technology, like trade, transport, communications. This creates corridors between previously isolated ecosystems all over the world. And a perfect example of these corridors made visible was the pandemic of COVID-19, an outbreak that was transmitted through our man-made global connectivity. I wrote this in the past tense, hoping it would be done by the time I read this. Basically, technology and globalization opens up the doors to other people's homes, which is genuinely lovely and should be excellent, unless you're robbing them. And here's the dark twist to our fairy tale. The goods that nature provides are being siphoned off to serve the rich, while nature itself, which we are utterly dependent on, is being destroyed. The cry of the earth and the cry of the poor are linked. And this technological mechanism of globalization, wrongly used, physically allows this destruction. We call this the mindset of the technocratic paradigm. A bit of a complicated term, but it's basically the lie that we as individuals are more important than nature and our fellow neighbours. And this allows us to justify our actions of robbing others of their healthy ecosystems. So here we can see the person who sees the earth as nothing more than something to be exploited for their own personal gain. So the truth, we just had the lie. The truth is very different to the technocratic paradigm. The truth is we are not individuals apart from nature. We are an integral part of our planet's ecology. We are a part of nature and we cannot live without it. And we are not independent individuals. We are interdependent with and rely on our fellow humans through our global and daily interactions. So the reality of the situation is that we are joined in an integral ecology. And as Eileen pointed out before, integral ecology means everything is connected. So at that point, I would invite you to ponder this image. Now this is an image that I call the Good Samaritan. And I want to sort of put yourself in the picture and look at what's being seen. We've got, you know, the mass extinction of many of our planet's wildlife. We've got conflict over minerals and slavery. You know, we have climate change. We have all these problems, and we can see them all. We see them on a screen the whole time. We're not, with all the technology we have, we are not separated from the suffering of this planet. Yet we tend to go along with this, and we buy more than we need. We buy things that because they're cheap. We buy for convenience, and often we don't have any interaction with the people who have made it or where it's come from. So if you put yourself in this picture and ask yourself, in the story of the Good Samaritan, am I the bandit in this picture, consuming without ever interacting with those who produce or deliver the goods? Am I the passerby who's watching the news and convincing themselves that it's not their business? Am I the Good Samaritan, being more concerned with caring for those around you than your own convenience? Or am I the wounded, the starving, enslaved, poisoned, or just simply lonely, isolated, or poor and cast aside by a world that values progress above care? And the reality is, I think we're all of those. All of us are all of those people. And this is, you know, because of the way the world works today, we all have a responsibility. We are all partly responsible for these problems. And this really, you know, there's an inconsistency in the way we're living as Christians today if we are taking part in these actions. But it's not all our personal responsibility. It's a societal problem that needs addressing, because, you know, just by living we are part of this of this problem, as long as we interact in the society that we live in. So we are asked to undergo, Pope John Paul II and Pope Francis have both asked us to undergo this ecological conversion, which again is perhaps a term a lot of people aren't so familiar with. So it's defined as in Laudato Si as where our effects of our encounter with Jesus Christ become evident in the world around us. And really, as Eileen's already pointed out, this is a spiritual and crisis as well. And we can look back. I've got this diagram, which is basically from sort of something I've put together from reading C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity. And this is a diagram of our relationships with the planet, with the people, and with God. And normality says, I'm in the center of this relationship. You know, every time we do something like buy on a certain online store, rather than going to the shop and interacting, or, you know, we are to some extent voting for the world we want. Every interaction, we're voting for the world we want. And sometimes convenience, we can't always interact the way we wish to, but sometimes convenience puts ourselves at the center at the expense of nature and our neighbor. So really we're putting ourselves as God in this situation. But what we're asked, and so this is the lie, this is the technocratic paradigm. But what we're being asked to do is a simple, it's a simple matter of basic spirituality, to put God first. And C.S. Lewis said, when you put God first, your relationships with others and with the world will be in like the spokes of a wheel. So myself, I'm now no more important than nature or the planet, and and that's what we're being asked to do. We're being asked to see reality. We're being able to see that we are part of an integral ecology, and make that change. And that the difference here is really, to some extent, technology. Technology makes things possible, but it doesn't necessarily make them right. So nothing's changed in our spirituality. It's just that we're updating how we approach a changing world with the same gospel. So the ecological conversion is really updating basic Christianity in response to a physically and technologically changed world and society. So I want to just end with two little things, if I can find it. There we go. Sorry, I'm going back to this. So again, picking up on what Eileen said earlier, right before her talk, which was very, very important. An ecological conversion, individual ecological conversion. You can feel very alone once the reality has hit you. Once you've allowed yourself to be shaken by, the magnitude of the problem, it can be very isolating. So what Pope Francis would say about this is that isolated individuals can lose their ability and freedom to escape the utilitarian mindset and end up prey to an unethical consumerism bereft of social or ecological awareness. And Pope Benedict also says the external deserts of the world are growing because the internal deserts have become so vast. So that refers back to our diagram. But this, it's very difficult on your own to make these changes. And this is really where community comes in. And really the example of Eileen's book club is, a brilliant illustration of why community is so important in, creating action to create hope for change. And so all of our work really with the Journey to 2030 campaign is all about trying to mobilize parishes and get them creating community action in order to be able to tackle this problem together with their different skills, different resources. So what Pope Francis says about this is that the ecological conversion needed to bring about lasting change is also a community conversion, and that around these community actions, relationships develop or are recovered and a new social fabric emerges. Thus, a community can break out of the indifference induced by consumerism. So, again, to reiterate what Eileen said about, snowflakes and avalanches. And so, yeah, so this is our main role of the Journey to 2030, as well as creating the Journey to 2030 is there so that people can see that there's a long-term thing that the church is involved with. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, JP, for your really, really inspiring talk. I'm now going to hand over to Dave Williams, who's going to facilitate the question and answer session with JP and with Maria Elena. We're going to have about 10 minutes now of questions and answers, and then we're going to move into the discussion group. So, Dave, I'll hand over to you at this point.
Great, thanks very much, James, and thank you very much, Eliana and JP and Eileen for the talks to sort of set the frame for today. There's a couple of questions coming in. First question has been somebody highlighted a particular development in some like pipeline expansion and the need to get energy spread around the country, etc. So how do you have discussions with people that perhaps don't agree with you. And I guess that's a question for both of you. So Eliana.
Well, this is something that I think we've been grappling with for years. In that, in parish communities, there are, not everyone thinks exactly the same, and I think things have been moving, and I think there is more consensus, but there's still kind of people who don't necessarily agree in terms of whether it's kind of in local issues, whether we're talking about fracking or coal power stations or wind power, or whether it's about kind of overseas work as well. And I think that there have been kind of some ecumenical initiatives that have been really positive in terms of kind of trying to start on a personal level and about what's important to us. I mean, I felt that, what Eileen shared as well, it could be a really helpful way in just to start at that personal kind of level, and really to kind of listen. I mean, I think there are real issues in this country about kind of having two quite distinct and possibly combative views of the world, and I think we need to listen to each other and explain kind of where we're coming from, but in a non-combative way. And it's not easy, but I think that the more you kind of share in as positive light as you can, the further people can get.
Great. Yeah. No, thank you very much. Anything you want to add, JP?
Yeah, I think from from a parish point of view, it's this is a really difficult one, but I agree. Finding that thing that you have in common is very, very important. And I think also actually understanding that a lot of the time, it's you can politicize arguments as much as you like, but a lot of the time, there's a lot of change needed. That's very scary. These are genuine fears some people have of, if you think of people's jobs, complete changes to the way things are happening. And I think actually everything we do has to address people's fears in a positive way. If people are going to lose their jobs for one thing, then we've got to make sure that they're finding jobs in something, that they actually want to do that benefits everybody. So I think actually, there's lots of fear, and I think sometimes that can be, it's not always, but it can be very legitimate.
Yeah.
So careful, I would say, carefully.
Oh, thank you. I think it's a really good point, isn't it? It's actually sort of listening and seeking to kind of understand where the other is coming from. So I've got a couple of practical questions that have been posted here. So has the Climate Sunday and other actions been taken up by churches together in England?
Well, it is an ecumenical project of churches together in Britain and Ireland. So it came out of the Environmental Issues Network meeting, which is a meeting of all of the kind of churches and agencies that are part of it. So that, they're very strongly supporting it. I mean, there's always a question of, how much individuals are talking about it, and I suppose we could all be better at kind of sharing, but I would say, if you are very involved in your own local churches together, do see whether you might be able to organize something jointly. I mean, I know, for example, in Portsmouth Diocese, a kind of JMP and CAFOD linked person thought, well, I want to do something ecumenical. And so she got her churches together to set a date during the Big Green Week to have a joint service. And so and they're inviting their MPs, so kind of ticking all the boxes to try and kind of work together and see how they can, really kind of create a kind of a real local community connection going beyond individual churches. So, I mean, I think there's all kinds of different ways that you can choose to get involved, but even just having something in your own parish community would be wonderful.
Great. And then if I can just follow on, because there's a slightly linked one there, which was that are the petition cards that you mentioned available for Scottish parishes, and does Parliament in your parish also include Scotland?
Well, of course, if people are interested and apply, you won't be turned down. Obviously, and I was hoping to speak to my one of my SCIAF colleagues, because our sister agency SCIAF obviously is the Catholic agency in Scotland, but I'm not able to speak to my particular contact there until next week. So I don't know exactly how they're kind of working. I know that they're very busy kind of preparing for COP. So I'm not sure if they're also kind of promoting a similar petition. Often we've done things kind of in tandem. But sure, you know, if you want to organize meeting your MP, I think that would be a fabulous thing to do. And I wouldn't be surprised if, you know, SCIAF staff couldn't support you to do that.
Great. And then final question, I think, because I'm conscious people probably want to have some discussion in the breakout rooms. And this is, I'll start with you if I may, JP, which was, how can we help people marry the cry of the poor with the cry of the earth? I think you were touched on that in your talk, but any key points?
It's actually, it should be very simple, but it's actually remarkably difficult sometimes. I think persistence is the key thing. I've noticed that we've done talks with people, and actually nothing happens on the first maybe talk, and then you keep in conversation with people and eventually it twigs. But I think in terms of getting involved with the communities in the UK, I think it's very important to look at the poor in our own communities as well when addressing these issues. It's because even I think National Geographic recently did a article on this was in America though, but it was about looking at neighborhoods and the decreasing tree cover as you went into the poorer areas, and the amount of pollution and shade, the temperature rose in the poorer areas because there was less nature. So there's sort of analogies that you can find in your own neighborhoods to sort of explain it quite nicely. Does that answer the question? I don't know whether.
Yeah, no, I think that's very helpful. I think it does, it does highlight that importance. So I think if that's okay, I think probably now would be good to go into the breakout rooms, and I think we should get a little invitation to go into our breakout.
Just quickly before we do that, I'm going to put the questions in the chat box so that you've all got them. So when you go into your breakout rooms, so hopefully you'll all have received that in a message. We'll see you back here in about 15 minutes.
Great, thank you very much.
So welcome back, everyone. I hope you had good discussions in your groups. So I'm going to hand over to Dave. Just to say one thing, you'll have noticed there were quite a few links that were shared throughout the evening. So we're going to share those with you in the post-event email. So keep an eye out for an email from Eventbrite, and you'll get links to all of the things that have been shared. So I'm going to hand over to Dave, who's going to share some of the next steps with us.
Thanks very much, James, and thanks very much for everyone joining in. So I guess the first thing is to say that we've put this together as this integral ecology group. So I've put my email details in the chat. So if anybody would like to become involved with the group, please just drop a line. And we've got a kind of group email very much for sort of sharing and looking to get together. As I say, it feels hard to believe we've only got together 4 times. And we are going to make sure that August is a holiday period, and we're going to look to get together again in early September ahead of the big green week. Wanted to quickly just ask JP and Marialana if they would like to say one key thing they would like to sort of recommend that's come out of groups or from your presentation. So Marialana, would you like to go first?
Thanks so much. Well, I would just say that, you have to look at what's possible in your own kind of context. So, you know, in your parish, if you haven't really done very much, you know, you might need to see if there's the possibility. I mean, something new that I actually haven't particularly mentioned was that CAFOD is going to be looking at having bidding prayers to have in the run up to COP. So that would be something relatively simple that you could kind of hopefully organize with your parish priest or with the administrator to kind of get those being said at a particular time in advance of the COP. So, I mean, don't be worried about starting small. I think that was another key thing that Eileen kind of spoke about. If you're already, you know, if you have a kind of active, thriving parish, you know, looking at something like the Live Simply Award would be something that I would really recommend. I kind of feel I'm very proud of it because I kind of, as well as campaign coordinator and the Live Simply organizer, we're up to 99 awards and kind of 400 people 400 groups, parishes and schools actively working on the award across the country. And I know that in Scotland, Eagle congregations and in Ireland are doing very similar work and doing really kind of impacting very positively in their parishes. So I would particularly commend those two things: thinking small but doable, but you know, looking to take things forward as best you can.
Great, thank you. And JP.
Well, I think from our group discussion, the yeah, again echoing what Maria Elena said, starting small things, just getting them going. Don't wait for other people, but start small. And also the slightly more abstract of thinking well of the difficult thing with the ecological conversion. Thinking well of people and things is half the effort, but it's very easy to forget.
Great. Thank you very much for that. So I think we've managed to put a lot of the links on a slide, which I think we might be able to share now. Is that right? He says, hopefully. Here we are, Eliana. So we'll make sure that you get all of these links and things out, but in case people wanted to quickly note something down, I'll leave that up for a moment. I think very much to wrap up now, it would be to sort of say thanks to everybody who's been involved in all these events, the speakers, the tech support, and everybody in terms of their listening, speaking, sharing and support. Please note that, you know, all 3 recorded sessions are on, or will be in the case of this one, on YouTube on the Focolare UK website, so you can see it again or show it to your friends. So please do feel free to share. This is how we get out to each other, isn't it? And finally, my last couple of words before we go to a closing prayer is: we may go faster alone, but we go further together. So if we could bring the prayer up, that would be great. And can I say thank you, everybody? So I think we have a nice prayer reflection to end with, and thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, everybody, and have a good evening and the rest of the week.
Bye-bye. It's been lovely.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.